Hello, thanks for tuning in. This week's Camposol Through Time, we're taking you back, way back to 1936, to the time which was to change the shape of Spain forever, the Spanish Civil War. And who better to help us understand a little bit more about those times and how the war affected the areas around Camposol? Our very own historian and time traveller, Antonio Hernandez Benitez. Antonio, how you doing?
Hello.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Right, this subject, we're going to try and cram into one episode.
Okay.
And when you think about the scale, the impact of the Civil War in Spain, it will just be a summary. But you do have some little things we can look at later.
Okay.
Can I ask you, first of all, just to set the scene, the Spanish Civil War itself, first of all, when was it, the years it was, and also how did it start? What started the war?
Well, the time it was from 1936 to 1939, okay, which is actually our end of the Spanish Civil War is the beginning of the Second World War. So this means like already in the Spanish Civil War they were involved indirectly and as well somehow directly different forces from which later on are going to be during the Second World War, like the Germans, you know, like the Italians, like the Russians. Okay, they will be all of them. They will be involved in Spain, and it's quite difficult to explain, especially in a short period of time, how this started. Okay, but we can say like it was a consequence of different economical and social crises that there were in Spain during the Republican times, and even before that. Okay.
So you say the problems with Spain before the war. What sort of problems were Spanish people experiencing?
Well, there was a serious economical crisis in the country, and there was the society was divided actually somehow in both sides, in two sides. Okay, one it was like conservative or ultra-conservative, and one it was like left or ultra-left. Okay, which there were plenty of different groups in Spain, like the anarchists, Falangistas, which was like the copy of the Mussolini party in Spain. Okay, and different other groups actually fighting each other. Okay, as well as some different political parties in favor of having again the royal family in Spain, and other political parties that they were demanding a different kind of royal family. Okay, religion as well was involved, so it was a mix of many things that actually create this really bad atmosphere.
So in 1936 it started, you say. Was there a sort of a definite point at which it went into sort of full war in Spain, or was it just a general escalation from previous sort of skirmishes and conflicts?
It was actually a general escalation, really. Okay, because already before 1936 they were already different. They were already trying both sides actually to take the control of the Spanish Republican government. Okay, so that's why it was something actually they were not expecting to have really the Spanish Civil War. They were expecting actually the national side, they were expecting to take the control of the country in 24 hours or 48 hours, but ending actually in a very cruel 3 years war.
So there are two sides on the war. There's normally just two sides on the war. You got the Republicans and...
We can call it the national, or they used to call it themselves national side.
And this is where Franco sort of came into.
Exactly. There were different groups in both sides. There were already different groups. Think about the Spanish Republican government. It's a democratical country, okay, where people they like very similar to nowadays, where people they have the freedom to choose the politicians they want in power. But already this Republican government was divided into different sides or different groups, like can happen nowadays in every single country. Okay, but in those days they were probably more radical than nowadays. Okay, they were like anarchists, as I say, socialists, communists, people from left or right sides. Okay, which is also they were demanding or they wanted to carry on with the system of a democratic country. And in the national side, you have especially the Catholic Church as well was involved, and then you have two different political parties that they wanted to have the royal families back into Spain. You have as well the fascist, actually in the Falange political party, which actually my grandfather was one of them. Okay.
Your grandfather was in that political party? Okay.
I have two grandparents, one in each side. Okay, one he was with Franco and the other one was against Franco. Okay.
It is, when we think about that, this, I mean, what's that, 3 generations? And it's actually very recent history, this. It's still very much sort of alive in some people's minds, the time of, not necessarily the war, because that was probably too far ago, but the effect on the aftermath of the war. I mean, when it comes to this area, Camposol and Matharon, Alhama, Totana, was there sort of leanings towards one side or the other around here?
Well, basically, when the Spanish Civil War started, you have to think a civil war is completely different to a war itself. What I mean is, like in the Second World War, for instance, which is one of the latest ones, or the latest one in Europe, you have an enemy, which is a country which is attacking your country. Okay? In a civil war, your enemy can be your brother. What I mean is, like, it's their own country which is fighting to himself. So, in many families, they were divided in two. Okay, you have some relatives in the other side fighting against you, or you fighting against the other one.
So it's not like, for instance, it would be from Camposol south to Matharon, and that would be all Republicans, and then north of that towards Totana Alhama, and there would all be the nationalists.
Well,
so it was more sort of subtle and integrated.
Basically, which both sides they have done during the Spanish Civil War is trying to eliminate their enemies in their own areas. Okay, think about Cartagena. It's going to be the last city to surrender to Franco. So we are going to have the longest period of the Spanish Republican side here in this area. So everyone have to be from the Republican side. Okay, in the national side, Franco is going to do exactly the same. Okay, if you are in a city or in an area which is controlled by the national troops, you have to be with them. You cannot express yourself with freedom to say, oh, I'm against that, or I not agree with the ideas. You can be eliminated, you can be killed. Okay, exactly the same used to happen around here.
So there's, when you say like Cartagena was the last stronghold of the Republicans, there are some big cities like Murcia and Totana, Lorca, and all the cities that surround it. How did they go about actually defending that city to keep it the sort of the last line of defense for the Republicans?
Well, it was already, before the Spanish Civil War, it was already well defended, with different guns in the mountains, controlling the Cartagena Bay. As well, there was, around Mar Menor area, around San Javier area, still nowadays, the aircraft, the air forces, and so on, which they were as well defending Cartagena area. So it was quite well defended because the importance of the Cartagena harbor, or the Cartagena port. It was very important for the Navy, still very important for the Navy nowadays.
It's hugely important, yeah. And the submarine service as well.
Exactly.
So on top of the hill, I've been up the hill with the big guns. Were they sort of built and put there for protection from the nationalists?
No,
specifically,
no.
Right?
They were actually installed before the Spanish Civil War.
Right, okay.
Okay, they were actually installed during the 20s, around the 20s, and it was actually before the Spanish Civil War. They were used during the Spanish Civil War to defend Cartagena from the national Navy or the national attacks.
Yeah, I've noticed as well when thinking about, I'm trying to picture this line of sort of. And I'm seeing it as sort of black and white, sort of Republican nationalists, but it's clearly not quite as simple as that.
No.
I noticed on the road that goes past Condado and then you come to the Alhama, Fuente Alhama road, there's some pillboxes on the hills there. That's the Civil War, is it?
Exactly. Around here, first of all, you have to understand, like around here there were no big battles or anything like that, like in different other, like the real front, which was more like in Madrid or Ebro River or in the north of Spain or different cities in the south. Around here it was during those days it was calm because they have been, as I say, big battles, but they have to defend actually especially Cartagena city. So they built actually this defensive line of different pillboxes from actually near Carrascoy Mountain, which is actually near the Condado roundabout. Yeah. Okay, El Paredón, actually there are around 4 of them.
All right. Okay.
And in the old road, which is actually behind this sector, actually there used to be 2 more.
The road that's, the bumpy road, the big long straight bumpy road that goes to the other side of Paraton, and there's some more there.
Yes.
Okay. So it was. I mean, it is geographically pretty much.
Basically, there were different trenches and different pillboxes built from the mountain actually to nearly the sea line, because they were expecting that somehow, in some point, the Franco troops, they will arrive from probably on the way from Granada or from Almeria, trying to take over Cartagena, because they couldn't actually take over Cartagena from the sea. Okay,
and the trenches, you mentioned trenches. Are they still there? Evidence of them? I mean,
some of them, yes. Some of them,
yeah.
In very small areas, you can actually see some of the trenches. Actually, my grandfather was building all these, building all the trenches and the pillboxes.
For the
Republicans. Yes.
And you've got something there from your grandfather?
Yes, actually, after the war, okay, he was the enemy. Okay, because when Franco won the war, they were already winners and losers. Okay, so my grandfather was one of the losers. Okay, and actually they have to eliminate everything that prove that he was somehow in the army, and he didn't actually fight any battle or anything like that. He was just a builder, basically.
Right. Okay, but he was a supporter of that.
Exactly. So they burn, actually, they destroy all the uniform and all the evidences. But even that, he was actually in jail for 5 years. Between Murcia and Albacete, there is a small city called Egin. He was actually in jail for 5 years over there.
For being part of the
Republican side.
Even though he didn't fight as such.
Exactly.
And you've got a little pin here. Can I
have
a look at that?
Yeah, for sure. This is the only thing that remains from my family, actually from my Republican family, really.
Now that, I don't know if you can see at home, that is a hammer and sickle star on a gold background. And this is what you'd wear as a button, is it? You turn it around, and let me just turn that around so you can see the back of it. So that is really something that's a little piece of history.
Well, you can be executed, you can be killed actually for just having something like that in those days.
Yeah. So, but it did survive.
Yes,
it did survive.
My grandmother, she hid it. Okay, so
they've got so much.
I assume for memory things, you know.
But it's really interesting to have the build-up to the actual war itself and how it affected the local people. And I know you've got some memorabilia. We're going to cover that in the next episode of Camposol Through Time, because there's some great stories here. And I could talk to you for hours about the history of Camposol.
Yes.
And what we've done so far, Romans, we've done all sorts of things. But now this is really getting into sort of modern history, 20th century history, which I think will probably touch you as well. Because you can go out there and you can see like the pillboxes and the story that backfills your experience of Spain. So that's it for today. Thank you. Cheers, Antonio. It's been brilliant. Thanks for watching us, Camposol TV. And we'll be here at the same time next week with the second episode of the Civil War. Take it easy. Thanks so much for watching.
Thank you.